Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our first Distinguished Speaker Series event for 2021. This is our flagship event series where we enable you to dialogue with distinguished men and women. And of course, because we're in the virtual world, that dialogue will take place by you typing in your questions into the Q&A function, and you'll find that in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screens. Please keep your questions short and sweet. Resist the temptation to write paragraphs or mini essays. It makes life much harder for the moderator. But because we're a very inclusive chamber, everyone can see everyone's questions, and members of the audience can choose to vote for which questions they like, and those that have the higher votes will be asked and posed to our guest speaker. And here to introduce Mr. Tan Chong Meng properly is the chairman of Singapore International Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Per Magnuson. Per, over to you.
Thank you, Victor, for that introduction. And good morning, everyone. I assume you are in our time zone here, so good morning, everyone. With us here today, we have a speaker with a long and distinguished history in corporate Singapore, as well as internationally. And let me warmly welcome our distinguished speaker today, Mr. Tan Chong Meng. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Per.
And before inviting Mr. Tan to address us, please allow me to introduce our audience today and the chamber. So we have quite a large audience today who represent the diverse companies which are the members of the chamber. And the Singapore International Chamber has been helping businesses in Singapore since 1837. So we're coming up a year to our 200-year anniversary. And this has been achieved not just by the chamber itself, but more importantly by all the members and companies and their contribution to the economy and to the community. And SICC, we are an inclusive and independent chamber. So we don't limit ourselves to any country or ethnical representation. And we use this independence to advocate for business and for Singapore to help sustain the economy of this very special country and to help our members to thrive. And I would say our voice have never been needed more than it is today. I mean, already before the pandemic for some time, the business world were already exposed to multiple challenges. The global trade barriers were increasing, multilateralism saw some major setbacks, and so on. But despite these headwinds, and maybe even more so because of them, SICC will always remain a strong advocate for international trade and for collaboration. So today, we have no one less than Mr. Tan Chong Meng as our distinguished speaker. And he is, of course, very well known by all of us in Singapore from the many roles that he has and have had. But let me anyhow just quickly, briefly mention them. So the last 10 years, Mr. Tan has been with PSA, where he is the Group Chief Officer of PSA International. He is also a director of the National University Health System. And as you saw, he was recently appointed as chairman of JTC. Last year, he was also appointed to co-chair the Emerging Stronger Task Force. So very many roles. And before joining PSA, he also had a about 20-year-long distinguished career in Shell. Before that, also served in the Singapore Ministry of National Development. So I probably only covered about half of it, but I'm quite sure that with this background in these roles that are so core to the chamber's activities and our members' interest, I can foresee an interesting discussion today. And I can see many interesting questions that we will challenge Mr. Tan with today. So as Victor has mentioned, since this is an online session, we will take the question in the Q&A tool and you can just key them in at any time. But let me end here and warmly invite Mr. Tan to deliver his address. So please, Mr. Tan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Per, and thank you also, Victor. for that warm welcome, as well as that, it's a good reminder of what I've been through. Now, you said that I've only joined JTC recently. It feels like a long time ago. But yes, I do come to you to share my experiences and my thoughts on how we are coping with the current situation, plus what's happening within the landscape. Look forward to the conversation, the questions. In our pre-meeting conversation, Per said that they're going to be challenging questions for me. I think we've been through a lot in the past year, so hope to learn more in the course of this session. We have colleagues from JTC. We also have colleagues from the Emerging Stronger Task Force who are with us. And I just want to acknowledge, in fact, what I see as a very diverse membership and attendee list from the SICC side, covering manufacturing, trading, logistics, real estate, finance, education, quite a bit from education, technologies, hospitality, marine. I mean, the list is quite long, so really look forward to your diverse views. I must say, Per, our conversation here is long overdue, but it's good that we have set it up. And I'm also really impressed that SICC have continued to listen to business over so many years, keep business spirits up within such difficult times, support trade economy, and help to shape agenda. First in Singapore, and then, as you say, broader afield, ASEAN and beyond. So, very exciting mission that SICC has. Now, what I'm going to share covers the activities within EST and some within JTC. I'm not going to touch on PSA. I'm sure you have questions for me, but for those who are interested in supply chain, but we'll take it up in Q&A. So EST, JTC, what have we done? But more importantly, also to share how we have done it, because I think as the world changes, it's not just your strategic choices, but how you work together. And collaboration is no stranger to the SICC way of doing things. So let me kick off. The next slide, please. I'll have Arvin help me flip the slides. Now, when we were appointed by DPM, the Emerging Stronger Task Force, that is Minister Desmond Lee, myself, and 15 private sector leads, we sat together and we said, so what do we need to deal with? Now, of course, there is a very obvious mobility impair situation affecting many parts of our industry. But at that time, we had to very quickly sieve through all the noise and say, within the uncertainty, what do we believe are certain? And that's a key, because yes, a lot of people focus on the unknowns, but actually there are certain things in the world that were already happening that we know would reshape the world while COVID-19 is a very severe episode. So there's a changing global order, creation of new trade flows. It was happening even before COVID. And now, even with the change in leadership in the US, we are still looking for new signs of how that trajectory may or may not change. And supply chains, I mean, very clear, it was disrupted, it was difficult because of the health pandemic. People started to worry about resilience. Used to be just in time, be efficient. Supply chain became a commodity. Things were upscale and made cheaper so that people could arbitrage labor or production locations around the world. But is it resilient? And then COVID accelerated the move towards digital transformation. I will not belabor that because I think we are already very familiar. I'll skip sustainability and talk about that last. But suddenly with digitalization, consumer preferences are more established in the speed of change. So we have to listen to the customer with new thoughts in mind. One is becomes more borderless. And actually, there are many new digital adopters, whether it's the consumer or the supplier, be it a hawker stall, a food producer, or a manufacturer. Consolidation and churn across industries continue, and there are challenges on SMEs, even challenges on the, of course, MNCs and all, but certainly a big watershed of change. Then coming to sustainability, which I think for SICC will also be one of the main drivers of change in your forward agenda. We felt that it's not just about building back good, but we need to build back better. It's not just recovery, but it's come out stronger. And sustainability is then a mid-long-term goal that we need to address. And you notice that today, let's say the last 10 years, and first talked about my history in Shell, the idea of climate change and the implications of a non-sustainable world has been well laid out in literature, but many people were not able to see how we could collaborate towards an optimal whole. But first, we must start with the intent of most major stakeholders, if possible, government, industry, and most importantly, people, society, to want to take this as a united priority task. And I think we're starting to see that. There are many solutions that are created now, and we are into the deployment phase and, of course, accelerated change phase. Countries have all come out to stake their ground on where they want to be when they want to be carbon neutral. I think it's very promising. So going through all this, we say that, yes, COVID is a root shock, but with these certainties, is Singapore well placed? And of course, the realization is, yes, in many areas, we have our strengths, but certainly inadequate in also quite a number. So the next slide, please. So as I was mentioning, it was set up in May 2020. And our task was actually it was a pretty clean sheet to say, how should Singapore refresh, imagine, or reset its economic strategies? I must first qualify that we work under the auspices or the umbrella of the Future Economic Council. So there were already many things afoot, like the FEC clusters in, what do you call it, ITMs, transformation roadmaps for different industries in Singapore. And we felt that there were a need to reprioritize or to tweak. Now, after going, next slide, please. After going through the strategic trends, we said that, you know, the previous approach of having a committee come together, doing research, doing analytics, formulating recommendations, and after 6 to 12 months, providing a report with recommendations for various stakeholders would not cut it this time. But within our first meeting or two, we said that we must have fast strategic conversions and a pivot towards action. It was amazing how within the task force, this was unanimous. Then we say, okay, let's then formulate our, our, if you like, strategic convergence, or what do we bet on? Simple words. What do we chiong towards if we wanted to do that? And chiong, for those who are not familiar, it's a word used by Minister Indrani a couple of days ago in one of our interviews. It's basically to charge forward together. And we said that Singapore has got to be even better connected. It was connected already. There are many operating businesses having headquarters and platforms based here, but it needs to be even more connected. Is our digital infrastructure complete? Is our digital regulation enabling business to do it on the basis of trust, legitimacy, as well as cross-border fluidity? Are we able to access talents in Singapore as well as overseas in a more borderless talent world? So connecting business, connecting supply chain, connecting talents, connecting ideas. Are we capable of doing that? And secondly, a Singapore that is sustainable from society as well as environment mainly. We wanted also inclusivity. So in this bias to action, the next step was to say, okay, where do we target? So the next slide. We realized that there were broadly 3 types of impacts. One, impacted sector. And even in manufacturing, even in the industry today, there are some that continue to be impacted, while others have got, I call it steroids, doing very well. And then there are industries where after COVID, it will not be the same because there will be new adoption, new technologies, new practices, and Singapore businesses have to be ready. And then, of course, new growth. And then we looked at the heat map of our total GDP, and then identified from the basis of GDP and workforce deployment, livelihood, well, mainly livelihood. What are the sectors we should target? And of course, impacted sectors, as you can see on the slide, would be mobility related, Construction is a relatively unique case because of the dorm environment. And then as you cast your eye down, you see that it is much more to do with our other normal economic sectors like trading, manufacturing, export-related sectors. And then new growth areas, which are enabled by the digital transformation, which they reach out to ASEAN and so on. We had at that time then consultations with a number of knowledge partners, whether it's McKinsey, BCG Ventures, or Singapore Business Federation, SIIA. So we drew inputs from all these resources and listened to their ideas and concerns. We also engaged some of the overseas chambers who are based here, like the European chambers, covering many of the countries from Europe. And they were also thinking and curious to learn from us what we were doing. Of course, that was in early days, but they were already shaping their own recovery posture. And for instance, what became then the next gen EU resource, the $750 billion that's available to sustainability buyers initiatives. And then of course, in ASEAN as well, the recent 27th ASEAN Economic Ministers Retreat said, okay, we're going to prioritize a number of areas. 13 was highlighted: recovery, digitalization, sustainability, but fostering, of course, regional openness, cooperation, and supply chain connectivity, and so on. So while all this was going on, we said, okay, let's, after listening to that, we felt this was still indeed the two biggest areas, and identified projects. We adopted a startup mindset and then identified projects under this new catchphrase called Alliances for Action. The Alliances for Action must qualify as gone beyond the EST now, and it's gone into economic areas, that is, and gone into social areas, as well as even an Alliance for Action for corporate purpose, which looks at the future of corporates. Now, how it works initially, as coined by the EST, is that it should be industry-led. For longest time, the policy-making approach in Singapore was done very ably and well by government, and then socialized, and over time became more of a participative. But here, there's got to be a top-down plus, more importantly, a bottom-up as well. So industry-led, identifying where the pain points are, what the industry pressures are, and to set up an environment where industry could bring into the conversation an aspired future for both industry as well as government. I will talk about one example, and then you can imagine the rest. And then, it's not just to talk, but to actually design and define MVPs over a short sprint, engage the related stakeholders, and then scale up viable solutions. For most of the AFAs that the EST is involved in now, we're actually at the last vertical, scale up viable solutions. We're also not stopping at the initial AFAs that were designed. New ones will come, and it will go through this 4-box process. In this whole journey, we have engaged about 650 private, public sector participants, be it corporates or individuals, through consultations such as this. And more recently, including with the labor movement, as the AFAs take shape, there are concerns about what does robotics mean for people, what does supply chain digitalization mean for hauliers, and so on. And now, perfect timing, Arvind, we jump into the 7 initial AFAs. You will recognize many of them by now, I hope. The Safe and Innovative Visitor Experience was set up in June, yeah. And it comprised folks from CAG, Changi Airport Group, SHA, Singapore Hotel Association, SECURES, the Singapore Association for Conference or Conventions, Events, and so on, NATAS, the tour group, STB, of course, and MOH, so the government agencies. And together they formulated what would be safe events, safe leisure. So it's really very pleasing to see, at one time, all the hotels were coming up with their own value proposition, all different ways to attract the non-existent user. And many of them were used for the COVID fight. But they know that at some point they have to impress and reassure and bring back the tourist user, even if it is a local tourist. Many were espousing value propositions that were self-created. So this team worked on the baseline for good hospitality, for good event management, the use of swabbing when people enter the event. You have joined some of these events, hybrid types. And then corporates who were actually event organizers need to step up, because before that they were mainly either online or offline, and here was a hybrid which needed a fair amount of technology. Travel Revive was the first big one that had inward travel, and it was a big event supported by government as well. It was very successful, and on the back of that and other experiences, the WEF, Professor Schwab was here in November and decided that yes, Singapore would be the place of choice for the alternative Davos for the second time in its history, and I thought that was really amazing. So we have to prepare ourselves and hope within the recovery that Singapore will be favored. I won't talk through each one of them in such detail, but built environment, the unique characteristic there is there was already an ITM effort on digitalizing the built environment to bring data standards, to bring good connectivity within the built environment to address design, planning, project management, facilities management, even sustainability. But the data environment, the standards for that, and the connectivity, the API standards were not that speedily and well defined. And the spotlight has been turned on that, and there is now an accelerated roadmap where there's also a clear process on how to onboard the power users first, and then after that, the rest of the whole industry. Smart commerce, online, offline, frankly, neither are complete, but they serve the one consumer. And the idea was, can we bring it together? And can we make this example happen in urban Singapore and allow Singapore brand owners also to reach out to overseas markets? Very exciting. And supply chain digitalization culminated in the agreement by government to build a common data infrastructure, which is unlike built environment. A built environment case, the digital approach is to create a data environment that comprise standards and interfaces, connectivity. But here, Singapore government is actually going to build an infrastructure that allows data to flow so that manufacturers can ping and get their data. Banks can reassure themselves that trade finance regularity and legalities are preserved. So it supports commodity trading, manufacturing, and also resilience. So we're also doing, say, a food resilience control tower under the auspices of this. But many people will have to transform as a result: the depots, the hauliers, the oil tank terminal operators, and so on. It's a massive project and trying to go live now with the MVPs first. Robotics, autonomous buses have been around, but there have been novelties. Can it be a proper commercial revenue generating concept with the consumer preferences, safety, and convenience in mind? So that's what's being piloted, as well as robotics. Cleaning robots seems simple, but to make that commonplace where consumers are reassured, building owners know what to choose, and the economic proposition is clear, that's not straightforward. EduTech, everybody's a teacher. There are many people who are on this call who are experts, but corporates want to have access to human capital locally, overseas, but also good human capital. And people want to improve themselves with a career journey that is actually renewed and also self-empowering. So that's the thesis for EduTech innovation intervention. Sustainability, the idea is to have carbon services as part of our future offer, building on Singapore's credibility as a trading hub in the region. Now, all these have more to do. Each one of them have at least 6 or 7 anchor participants from private and agency. As the EST moves towards its conclusion in terms of an EST task force, we get back to putting the AFAs within the auspices of FEC and also with the appropriate FEC cluster. Like, for instance, supply chain, we're going to ITM on connectivity, that sort of thing. But what we have learned is that everybody can contribute. There are many pain points that were not addressed in the multipolar approach towards solving complex problems. there is a huge opportunity to converge, to prioritize, and to economize our effort. And there is a huge opportunity to also be agile and to do these things within much shorter combined time frames compared to before. That's for the EST. Now, a couple of slides then on JTC. Of course, I said we engage very big power users. JTC as a major industrial builder and space provider is one of these. And you will see JTC being relevant and involved in these 3 AFAs. Digitalizing built environment, we are part of the initial core group that helps to design the common data environment. And of course, then roll it out within the contracts that we will undertake in future. Supply chain digitalization. There are many pain points. The AFA identified 60 over key pain points, and this is just the most crunchy ones. From logistics, like yes, there's no queue outside PSA port because we have a good port net system that covers the port community, timeliness, and so on. But we don't have a uniform depot management system, and so no queue outside PSA, but a long queues in Loyang at the depot. So we say, how can we be better connected? So under the AFA, we built very quickly a new smart booking platform, and more than 50% of Singapore users will actually migrate to that in the course of this year. And of course, with JTC, then how do we then change the curve on improving productivity, train people, and then actually improve sustainability as well? Because if you were to baseline between last year and the future, I think you'll see quite a dramatic impact. That's just one example of JTC's participation. We're also building Gateway Park in Tuas to try and enable these new digital twins in supply chain to highlight new solutions for cold chain, reduce power requirements, and so, and create a better offer to industrial users. Robotics, of course. I talk about autonomous buses, the 2 projects, one's in Science Park and the other in JTC, together with LTA, SMRT, SBS Transit, and so on. So exciting, still going on. We haven't finished that one yet. Of course, JTC has also been attentive to the needs of its clients and its constituencies. First with IR 4.0, already a few years. Then with COVID, resilient supply chains, and then taking on the new ambitions on sustainability. For IR 4.0, advanced manufacturing was key. So we have looked at how JTC should build a better infrastructure to serve future AM needs, not just the facility, but also the talent base as well. And this, you can see here, is the Jurong Innovation District project, where we see, for instance, Hyundai EV has lodged itself there and chosen there as one of its actually very big regional center, for production of EVs. They are making a bet on Singapore's connectivity in that project. And of course, it's not just about the infrastructure, but also the work, live, and place environment, because having a good workplace will need good talent. And we want to think of who will be the next generation of colleagues and employees in the industrial space. So reimagining that together with inputs from private sector. The next slide, please. And on to sustainability. If we build it better, we also want it to be green. Energy saving solutions, starting with efficiency, and then stretching to imagining circular economy. There's a big space in between. And within the big space, there's new energy, there's resetting our behaviors, and then there's collaborative solutioning. But based on science, based on data. And so project on the right, you see Punggol Digital District actually starts with an open digital platform that is being built that enables that data to expose and inform us of our behaviors and suggest better solutions for us in this future industrial sector. Last slide. So whether it's from EST or JTC's perspective, I think we all have to change Singapore, our infrastructure, our regulations, our processes, and our people in an inclusive manner to be better positioned for the digital economy. It's not going away. it is accelerating. In fact, it is a course that has already been run for a number of years. And we need more good infra, data environment, infrastructure regulations. We are a great urban setting, which is a great example for many, as well as a hub within a very huge ASEAN region of several 100 million people and GDP that is rising within global ranks. But we need to do it sustainably. Nature-based solutions, for instance, abound around us, but not easy to harness. And can we define for ourselves what it takes for Singapore to be sustainable, but at the same time be a platform to unlock these regional solutions? And then finally, and not lastly, stronger together is key. How we formulate, as in like the AFAs, so that's gone beyond economy now, and how we prepare. And by that, I mean our workforce, which all of you have got your own employees and colleagues as well. And this is something that we have to continue to soldier on for a number of years to come. So I'll pause here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was a quick, but still a very comprehensive review of where we stand. And I found, I mean, the emerging stronger task force work that you hear introduced so well, it can sometimes, become a little bit theoretical, but the way you connected it here with the work you're doing in your other roles of JTC was actually very helpful, because you could see the concrete examples then on how to apply it in a real situation, which I think was excellent. Yeah, so thank you very much for that, and I'm sure we can come back to many of those topics that you mentioned there. Yeah, so feel free to key in question in the Q&A tool. But while you're thinking and shaping your questions, let me kick off with some question. And I'd like to start. I mean, we can do these questions on so many topics. We have all the PSA and the logistics topic, the JTC topics, your old background in Shell, and of course the emerging stronger and all these other roles. So I'd like to start with on emerging stronger task force. And you clearly explained that this is not the normal process that you work for 12 months and then comes a document, but you're actually had a far strategic alignment and then a bias towards the actions, which of course is a brilliant setup. And you could see that in JTC. My question is though, will there be in the process of this, will there also, in addition to these quick actions, will there also be a strategy document or something coming out of the emerging stronger, or will there be an end to the emerging stronger task force? Is there a timeline, or where are we actually in the process of the emerging stronger task force?
Okay, thanks, Per, for that question. Yes, so the Emerging Stronger Task Force was given a 1-year tenure. In that 1 year, starting in May, suggests that we will wrap up formally in about May this year. And you talk about whether there will be a report, it's in my hands. But the report is just the physical part. We have to do a number of things first. The AFAs and the MVPs in themselves, having borne fruit to different levels, will need to be, if you like, we call the word graduated. For those that are going to run its course, we will hand it back to the agencies, like Safe Travel at some point will run its course. WEF is going to be a major thing, but you run its course, and then after that, safe passports, safe travel, going overseas. I think government is really taking on that task very well, and we are supporting. And so some will run its course, some will have a longer life and will be incorporated, like supply chain digitalization, common data infrastructure needs incorporation, and sustainability, carbon mechanism hub needs to incorporate. And then if there are good opportunities to create business proposals out of whether it is, say, cleaning robots or autonomous buses, they can take on future commercial life. But we also hope that these initial ideas will set the base for other types of robotic adoption, right, in the in the social space. Because in industrial space, we are no stranger to automation. We know how to do it within our boundaries. The human-machine interface is key, and we know how to do that. And so I just described anecdotally, but you can see that we are poised to, with the mindset that work goes on, and working with labor movement to help them with ideas on how to prepare the respective sectors. But we don't need an EST to do that. We need the FEC to do that with DPM and cabinet ministers and so. So we've socialized these ideas with FEC, and they're supportive. I say, okay, now we put it to paper. And then we will continue to socialize with other interest groups like labor movement. And this is one example which came from yourself, of your initiative. But key groups will be talked to, including those who have all pitched in to help the AFAs, the 600 old people, to be accountable to them. And then after that, it goes back into FEC ITM. But the work of imagining AFAs, we hope, is then become more co-owned by more people. Beyond the 7, we've also got one on MedTech. And the current thinking is address in vitro diagnostics, IVDs, as a horizontal to enable more options in the continuity of our our participation in the medical economy. We're also looking at one in agri. So it doesn't mean the EST shifting down. We're also thinking of one for exports to ASEAN markets. And as you can see, government is also using the concept. So we want to leave behind not just a strategy on choices that we need to continue to make, but the how. And that how, in fact, we've also had the Civil Service College come and research our AFA approach. And they're going to accompany our report with another report, which is how AFAs work.
Oh, yeah. So interesting. So we'll actually both get something to read, and gosh, I would love to read that now. But then also it would also in a way then live on through the AFAs and in FEC going forward as well. And so it's a combination.
Yeah,
that's very good. Yeah. Another thought I had when normally in a strategic work like this, then you start out with looking at the past, and then you see what is changing and the trends, and you presented the future and the trends you see very well. Did you also in this work see what has been the Singapore success factors? Because there's no denying it, and I'm as a foreigner can definitely testify to it, that Singapore's success is tremendous, right? So what are the historical traits and features that made Singapore so successful, and are they still valid, or are some of them, sorry, that one doesn't work anymore, that one doesn't work anymore? So how urgent is this, the new thinking? Is it like, well, we add a little bit 5% on top, or is it really very transformational?
Yeah, it's hopefully the latter, not 5% on top, but transformational, but transform in which areas, right? So the Singapore strengths have been a strong government and very well-trained workforce, addressing all the layers of society. Our IHLs handling the professional skills, and then the technical skills and the industrial skills. And then we also have many corporates who are more established in their way of looking after employees' training needs. So we have corporate academies in many of the Queen Bee companies, more than the average. So the investment in learning is quite great, and also the good legal environment as well as the financial environment. Although there have been some challenges recently, it's not just Singapore; it's a global feature of a world that is tested in the digital realm. And we're also neutral, I must say, and sit within a very vibrant and emerging trading and economic, could I say, block. And so all these are the strengths, and none of these actually go away. But then how do we use it perhaps becomes different. I mean, in the past, we've attracted people to come invest in us as a platform. We have to much more take the mindset of work with us to change you and to change us and to change our environment and change more than just the verticals. And the way we need to do it then is to move somewhat away from being siloed. As we found in COVID, the biggest issue was fragmentation of supply chain, fragmentation of industrial interfaces, non-transparency. We don't know which parcel of rice is sailing on the water towards us. For example, data was fragmented. Even policy making or say many agencies that we talk to in supply chain, each have a very well thought through vertical of responses, intelligent freight planning, business sans borders. I can list quite a few, and A-Star have a lot of good technologies that if you apply them all would make us a very different animal. But the convergence wasn't there. So all the strengths have to reconverge by first starting with the question, what is the problem we are solving? One of the things I learned in Shell very early days, of course, scenarios and all that are part of the course, but the first question that we need to address in problem solving is, what is the problem? And that needs to be rethought. Yeah, and that is the difficulty. It's harder to shape future problems that are enduring. A problem statement that lasts for 5-10 years is very difficult to shape. A problem statement that lasts for what I need to do or eat for lunch, I mean, it's very easy, right?
Yeah.
And that can only come by being willing to take on diverse views. So our response to government colleagues and also private sector is that don't hold on to past assumptions. Let's put it all on the table. But I must say, because of COVID or otherwise, frankly, I hope the spirit continues. And that is, with this crisis, people didn't hold on for very long. I was willing to put the projects on the table and then say, okay, what do we need to work together? Some of the many of the meetings in the AFAs had attendee list of about half of your current audience, about 40. I've got the secretariat from EST here. They've been really busy setting up this type of big meetings, but except that they are not audience, they are participants, they are contributors, they are action takers. And that's 30, 40 people in one meeting.
That takes some to organize, and all of them are used to being the leaders, I guess. So.
That's key. I mean, the other thing, first, you as a business leader, you know this, businesses are used to taking quick actions and somewhat used to being self-serving. Yeah, I mean, that's our instinct. And self-serving is what propels speed.
Yeah.
Of course, we want to serve ourselves, we serve our community, but at the end, we always have to address the question, what's in it for our company and our people. Bringing that attitude into a sort of a convergent environment is actually not that easy, even for business leaders. So for government leaders, it's like, am I changing the line to be drawn between public and private a little bit more openness and all? Is that comfortable? Is that okay? But even for private, we have folks who say, is it okay, or will I be misunderstood if I work in this area? Because it's action oriented. Oh. It's just policy, you rubber stamp together with 30 other signatures. It's not so bad, but you're going to drive it like smart commerce is driven by Shopee and CapitaLand. Mm-hmm. So as businesses, we must also be courageous to demonstrate that we're able to think beyond ourselves and take a responsible approach of moving forward the whole industry. Now, how many business leaders would want to do that, can do that, and I'm willing to do that day in, day out? That I'm a beneficiary because the whole industry is a beneficiary. Yeah. Right. So that's also we should ask ourselves.
Yeah, and that's actually quite core. So the AFAs are industry-led, but of course you also mentioned it's top-down and bottom-up, right? And I think we've heard some people say that they are too much top-down driven, but I think that's the core. Business leaders were used to being egoistic. So Victor has a question here about how do we sustain it? Because in terms of industry-led, you correctly mentioned the companies are used to thinking for themselves and not for the greater good, right? So how do we now sustain this? How do we keep the momentum of the AFAs?
That is a $6 million question. And it requires people to want to keep it going. It requires people from both public and private backgrounds to say that this is not just a new fancy novelty that will go away with COVID, but a new way to test policy making. So the policy kitchen can open a few doors and side rooms, and so like even the green plan, right? There'll be a lot of execution in the green plan because the green plan covers so many dimensions. Could we find new AFAs that would help to flesh out? And if something were to, as far as the plan is concerned, be assumed to take 5 years, could we try to do it in 3? So those are things that I think in COVID we learned, right? We don't have the luxury of time. We don't have the luxury of complete talent base. So we have to find solutions. A single party, whether you're government or private, would be inadequate. So what do? You give yourself insurance. If your boss asks, can you do it in 3? You say, oh yeah, we'll try, but let's take 5. But in COVID, you say, oh yeah, actually it probably will take 5, but we want to do it in 3. And that can only happen if you collaborate, to be frank.
Yeah, absolutely true.
So the $6 million question as we're discussing is, how will the FEC for the economic side take this on board and lead this? And I would say the last meeting that we had with key leaders in government will suggest is that there's a lot of support for this. So we're hopeful.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah. And one part that you mentioned in this as part of the core part was the competence and how do we continually develop the workforce. And you mentioned also that has been a historical strength of Singapore's success in the past. And the current policy is also limiting the global participation in the Singapore workforce. We want to reduce reliance on foreign construction workers. We want to have less foreigners in our restaurants, and also in the PMET space, we want to have give a better chance first to Singaporeans, and of course that can only be done by squeezing the coming in. So this I guess is 2 questions in one. One is the one Victor is asking here: how can we ensure that competency enhancement? And that's of course a $12 million question maybe. And how does that tie in with the kind of the ambition by to reduce the reliance on foreign workforce?
Yeah, so the reliance on foreign workforce, the preparedness of our workforce, and what type of foreign dependency we should continue to expect and design on the basis of is what comes out from, I think, a more deep-seated question about how do we continue to build social inclusion and ensure that the social health, the mindset, I would say the confidence of any country, society in the future developments of the country is a balanced one from the social perspective. That I think is the bigger question. And then the talents that you need really depend on the economic strategic areas of choice. I mean, if we want to be a regional sustainability solutions hub that is science-based, that is accreditation-based, that is commerce-based, and not just tweaking some of the industrial emissions that we have, we have to have professional help in the beginning while very quickly training ourselves to complement. And also then the access to this professional help can be in different forms. COVID teaches us that you can do a job across border as well without being in a location. So depending on the area that you address, I think new solutions will have to be found, but always explaining and addressing the social inclusion and the future economic participation issue. And of course, then there is the productivity issue as well. In some of our industries, we really need to raise productivity. We should acknowledge, admit that, and move on. And in some of these places, actually, the foreign labor is not taking up a local job because our locals don't want to do it. So we have to be open and then be more, how do you call it? Be more issue-based in formulating the solutions, always thinking of social inclusivity. But at the same time, I see, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Singapore being capable of changing its education base, using corporate, using IHL in a different way, as we're thinking of looking at, in fact, even exporting some of the Singapore pedagogy, and then using that to attract talents, nomadic talents, we call it, in a different way from, the usual of you got to come here and expect posting for 6, 8, 10 years, but maybe there are different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the world will open up because the next generation expectations on where they want to spend their time, will they want to live forever in Singapore and that kind of thing, will also change.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's. I think if you ask our members, I think the biggest answer, the biggest limitation for their growth is actually the talent supply, and whether that is then from the domestic workforce or whether it is the tightening of the foreign workforce. That there you get different answers, but it's clear that that is a key factor for our continued growth.
So I must first qualify that what I said just now is the inferences that the EST members, myself, and some of our colleagues have pulled together in the months of looking at this topic. Yeah, not so easy. The final policy making is above my pay grade.
Naturally, and that's why it's so interesting to listen to you also. And Patrick Tan actually here has a good question regarding digitalization of the build sector, because that's connected in this, right? How we utilize the talent better and how all of this is. And it's something that has long been discussed, and we know the benefits, but it seems to be a slow adaptation. Do you see any barriers? What is holding us back? And also here, someone from the industry asking for more government intervention, because it says left to the industry or the companies to drive it, is it likely to happen?
Yeah. So when you talk about digitalization, actually, different industries, as we know in the IR 4.0 world, have digitalized at different paces. Their trajectory, their journey, their opportunities are different. And in part also reflects the history of that industry. The financial industry has been a fast adopter because they are less reliant on the connection between digital and physical. The more you need to combine digital and physical, the more you are going to be more challenged if you want to create a system solution. In a single company's operating environment, like in manufacturing, I'm sure in your company as well, you digitalize to the extent possible. And you are not shy from taking advantage of the digital tools that are available because you set the governance, internal governance. When you get to complex industries like built environment and supply chain, the overall governance that addresses the concerns of the broad range of players, not so easy. We've been trying to do that for many years, right? And then when this thing is not ready, and people will judge, especially the SMEs, and say, I'm giving up my this, I'm sharing my data, I mean, what am I getting? And of course, the answer that comes back to them is far from perfect. It's still a maybe. And the maybe is because you only get there when everything gets there. But, aspirational promises don't cut ice with many of the companies who are going to have to pitch in with resources. So the first is having a shared vision of where we can be. And so built environment and supply chain, I think we try to also illustrate what could be our moonshot, right? Our ambition, aspiration that imagine if we are set up in this way, then our bakwa can go overseas in a faster way, our barbecue pork, that kind of thing. So, and built environment, we can start to tackle sustainability design concerns, even at the point of design and planning and so on and so forth. So getting a meeting of minds then gets down to how to get to the grunt work. The grunt work is governance, infrastructure, technical and legal standards. And then after that, you get to a very challenging part, which is persuasion, scaling up, all those things, which is beyond a single corporate. As I said, single corporate and single industry, non-physical, easier. So I think we will get there. Previously, for instance, the built environment, overall scheme of things, the whole long project under the integrated digital delivery, and I think people who are on the call, like from Redas and all, you recognize this, was seen to be an ambition over the next 10 years. We'll try and do that in 5, right? When we introduce smart booking, that project, we have trained a lot of hauliers. There are 260 over haulier companies in Singapore. 60% of them have less than 10 trucks. So really micro haulier, I call it, right? So when you need to train them, and we've been training, make more effort to train all this. And so it's piece by piece and stage by stage, I must say. And then the other thing also, Per, is that we will face challenges. Yeah. Any new modus operandi or new system, over the last 50, 60 years, we've seen how many cycles of global financial system tweaking, right? Because every time we get to a new agreement on how to work, it is challenged by people for their own gains. No, we'll be challenged on data, on this, but we should not be afraid. We should use all this to help us improve. And that is the mindset I hope as businesses, we should first and foremost adopt. Do I just want to be helped, or am I going to help myself? And that switch defines the more successful ones in the future from the ones who are not going to be successful. So then the question to the business is, do you want to be successful or not? If you want to, well, that's going to be ways to do it. Yeah. As they say, nobody can keep a good man down or a woman or whatever.
That's very true. Yeah, this digitalization in these complex processes is, of course, requires everyone to think in. We need standards. We need
and actually, government is designing more and more schemes on digital readiness, on IR 4.0 readiness, and thinking through concepts like even digital adoption coaches and grants, and so with willingness and ambition, I think we can meet.
Yeah, I'm certain. There's so many benefits for everyone. Given your long history as a leader, I think Scott Beaumont here has a very good question, and he says, thanks for raising the desire to source diverse views in the EST work. How did you engage to deliver on this aspiration, and how might this develop further in the future?
There is a set of Stronger Together conversations that's being held. MTI does continue to engage through the chambers. I suggest maybe for SICC to also see whether or not in your communication channels, whether some rethinking to plug into the appropriate doorways or resources. Keep being attentive to the work of the FECs. I sincerely believe that the FECs will take a more active form of collaboration. People are, and NRF is going to play a big role in looking at new solutions. So look out for the drivers of change, and then plug in as much as possible as businesses or as chambers. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and as SICC, as I said in the introduction there, we really stand for openness, inclusiveness, and collaboration. That's our core theme, where we feel all members can do better if we work together. So fully do that. I am surprised we're not getting any questions from the people on your PSA role and the supply chain disruptions we have, but we still have time, so I will continue with this, because I guess it also, the Emerging Stronger Task Force is so exciting, and that's our future for Singapore. So Simon Middleborough has a question on the AFAs. So how are the AFAs aligned with what Singapore trading partners, whether nations or businesses, are expecting and hoping about Singapore in the future?
Okay, the AFAs in and of themselves, every one of them is a microcosm of a more complex area of change that is needed, right? So let's say you talk about the commodity trading industry, covers so many things. We already have the involvement of many stakeholders, ESG, IMDA, and MAS, and ABS, the banks group, and then CDS, the logistics group, SBF, you name it. We're all sitting at the same table. And then, of course, we talk about what are the critical things to address, starting with the physicality and then the things that are enabled by the physicality. So we say, okay, there's e-commerce interest from China. One SME is a big Chinese platform with hundreds of thousands of customers on their platform. They want to connect to our platform, but very difficult to have fulfillment. I mean, digital contract is one thing. Getting the goods to move, as you well know, with compliance and regulation and intermodals is another thing, right? Trade finance is another area that actually got jammed also. Mm-hmm. And so in order for our ideas to work in this space, we must look at what is going on now, who to work with. So we're working with One SME, with Bisman, with Easy as examples, to provide fulfillment to them and enable businesses to go overseas and vice versa. But at the same time, we need to then connect with the countries when it comes to compliance, simplification, when it comes to digital agreements that cover the recognition of legal documents. And then we ourselves have prepared within Singapore the recognition of digital documents legally, right? So all these are bits and pieces beyond just building a physical IT infrastructure that enables data flow. And this is still work in progress. It continues to be. Singapore spearheaded the concept of trade trust in the last WEF, which deals with the recognition of digital documents and enable trust environment for data to be exchanged. That was just the beginning. Now we have the infra, and there are many layers, not just the document, but the physical fulfillment processes. A freight exchange was created to allow people to indent trade freight across borders so that they can handle local logistics from overseas, for instance. So this has attracted the interest also of some other countries in looking at what should be the next phase of digital agreements. So that those kind of conversations do go on. And Singapore has been spearheading some of these digital agreement alignments, and while in the initial phase they are quite conceptual. What do they really do? And how do we capitalize on it? And that's got to be fleshed out. That's why the AFA's approach is very interesting and useful, because we go beyond talking about concepts to say, how does it actually work? So that was just one example. I think there will be other examples. Sustainability is going to be huge. It's going to require us to listen to our local industries and also our neighbors and say, what can we do together? Because this is a global fight. Not I win, you lose, or you win, I lose, but this is a we both lose or we can both win situation.
It's complex, again, complex, but there seems to be a clear plan. One thing, we have a question here on developing the workforce, and a reflection on that is, I don't think I've seen any country that puts so much emphasis on developing its workforce with reskilling and upskilling, and there are grants for a lot of things available, and you can clearly see the intention and the willingness to achieve something there with our aging workforce and all the changes we have. So it's really fantastic, but it is a challenge, right? Despite doing all this, we feel it's going way too slow and not really moving, right? So what do we need to change to ensure we achieve a continually developed workforce is the question here. And
Did you ask that? Did you ask that of Minister Josephine?
Yes, actually, I have done that. That's absolutely true. And it's
I know you did that, right?
But I think everyone is a little bit, frustrated about it, right? Because we're trying so hard, but it seems not enough.
Yeah, I think looking at it from the corporate side, and here we are all corporates, and so we get the our education system, almost globally speaking, is one that invests in a long period of learning before you even start work. And then you have a career of, well, let's put it 40 years, which will probably cover 3 generations of technology or ways of working, and also see many twists and turns in the political environment. And so how is your single education approach going to work, right? So continuing education will be key. So I do believe that continuing education will become big for our AHLs, IHLs, and our corporates. And I still believe that between the IHLs and corporates, there's a lot more that can be done on collaborating towards developing local, while being still very honest and clear that we still need to import, where, how, over what period, and so on. I think today, maybe this script or this requirement is still evolving in its clarity. And so work need to be done on that. Again, as I say, above my pay grade. But from what I can do and what we have a corporate academy as well. And we have designed with SIT a course on systems engineering. I grew up with mechanical engineering training. All of us in engineering 30 years ago actually trained in a vertical. But that will not help you solve the Boeing Max issue. Meaning that you need to actually combine quite a number of integrated skills. And as we in PSA move to TWAS, it's totally automated. And we don't want to be helpless in a complex environment. We have 1,000 over people in engineering. And many of them are like me, verticals. And so we designed with SIT a course that would take 30 of them at a time and give them a course on actually advanced systems engineering, covering the mechatronics and the systems and IT and so on. They come back, they get deployed to a different job straight away. And it took a bit of challenge to curate, to invest in the development of the course. It's not $1, it's actually in 6-digit numbers, actually 7-digit numbers to develop the course. For IT to identify and set aside the resources. Then it's night learning, and then they come out trained. They are all in their 35 to 40 years old, have 10 years in domain and retrain. We have PSLE when people are at primary 6. There's no PSLE at 40. But we want to create a challenge for people to want to upgrade. This cannot be episodic. This must be systemic. And I hope we'll see more of this.
Yeah, I think that whole competence question, it will be the key for Singapore going forward. That's absolutely clear. We have more questions on the EST work here also, but may I just interject the question more on the logistics side? Because I was listening to a radio show that you were on about a year ago, and then I heard you say on Money FM, I think it was, that if there is a surge in demand, supply will not be there. And if there is a surge in supply, demand will not be there. I mean, that was very astute of you. You clearly saw this coming, because at that time, the challenges the logistics sector had about a year ago was very different, right? There was one of restrictions and so on, right? But you clearly saw this coming, and unfortunately, you turned out very right. So, so how do you see this evolving? Will it be a swing to the other end soon, that we will have too much supply of shipping capacity, or will it remain like this for a long period of time? Or what's your forecast? You clearly know, so.
No, I don't. It's just an attempt to at least take a position. And unfortunately, yes, I was more right than wrong, which is not great, because the reality is not nice. What we have seen is a situation created by 3 or 4 fundamentals. One fundamental is, where are people spending their money today? They can't spend on services, they can't take holidays, so they spend on home improvement. And home improvement sales have gone up. They spend on snacking, so FMCG snacking sales have gone up. And all these need transport. They are fairly reasonable value goods, not very high value, so they can't be air freighted.
Mm.
They need the sea, right? So in needing the sea, that increase in demand and the distance between production and consumption is also quite large. It's not made in Mexico, consumed in US. It's actually made in China, consumed in US. So the long is actually ton miles wise or container miles wise quite high. That's where the demand supply. So that's number one, where people spend and where in the geography are the production, and China is still the manufacturing capital that has a quick response because it came out of COVID very quickly.
Mm.
And so those are the physical realities of trade. Then the other one is on the supply side, the equipment, the ships and the containers. There's a finite number to each. And I made that comment because I saw that at that time, people were pulling services and reducing number of ships. But now the opposite has happened. They're using everything everywhere, but still not adequate, partly because the containers themselves are stuck. And that gets to the third fundamental, which is that in a number of countries and locations, at the destination or the origination side, things are still not flowing as fast. We saw some recent examples in US because of the cold snap as well, for instance, and not just COVID. So when flow is not happening fast, the physical enablers of flow, containers and ships, are not returning to the origin as fast. So then it look like you have a shortage. Capacity itself on the whole actually is adequate, but because of the slowness of flow, exacerbated by the surge in demand, you've got a triple storm, I call it, not a double storm, together with COVID and all. So if, let's say, travel can resume in the third quarter or fourth quarter, for people to spend their money differently, instead of hammering on the walls, they can go out and take a holiday. And that there's only so many walls that you can hammer, right? So I think demand is quite high now.
Mm.
And flow is slow. So if these two equations starts to change, we see that most likely it'll be another 4 to 6 months before we see a turn. Yeah, and that's why 3 or 4 weeks ago, we kept getting accused of being part of the problem. We're trying to be part of the solution. It's not easy. My wife went to the wet market over Chinese New Year and wanted to buy prawns, and the prawn seller, prawn fish seller said, "You better stock up because we are having a shortage." And then she asked why, and she said it's all locked up in PSA. So my wife didn't know what to do, what to say. But far from that being the case, in fact, I came back, told my folks, I said, let's respond by offering a set of solutions. So we went public in media and all that. We have a number of unique solutions. People were already writing to us and saying, can you help over Christmas? And we said, yes, we can help you physically, but make sure your documents are in place, blah, blah, blah. Every time a problem is raised to us, even though we may not be the front runner that own the problem, not a forwarder, not a shipping line, we have somehow been able to try and change that equation. So I'd say to you, folks on the line as well, if you have a problem, we have a number of solutions that actually not just Singapore, but starts from overseas where we do have ports. We can advise or we can help. And we also have a data platform and a trade cargo facilitation platform called Calista, where we have Calista Ping offered for free. If you do your business with us and you want free track and trace, we offer that too.
Okay. Well, I guess knowing where your goods is and are and the predictability of it helps businesses. It's just the lead times have gone up and up and up, and we are also taken by surprise.
So you just do this.
Yes, exactly. And I think we were also, in many businesses, were taken by surprise on the strong demand pickup, right? So that also means that the stocking in our companies were not enough because we expected a lower demand, and now the demand is higher, and we need to get the goods in faster.
My concern is where the overall impact, including the cost, will start to affect certain categories of manufactured goods in their total trade and sales, and that will be another turning point in especially the lower cost food, which needs refrigeration and all that, and then it will have a negative effect possibly as well.
Right. Yeah, so Victor here has a slightly leading question on the workforce. He has said, do you think the pandemic has helped reduce the level of complacency in companies and in the workforce, which built up before COVID-19 struck? So I guess it's two questions. Do you identify with that there were some complacency? Because I think that's what we feel, and has it changed our world?
I can only speak anecdotally. I think the people that we work with who naturally are positively pitching into the effort are not quite complacent as to and they bring their expert resources and all that, as to how they then lead their every last individual in the workforce. That one I can't say. But broadly speaking, if I were to say that in terms of the resident workforce unemployment, that it remains quite low, it suggests to me that people have found a way to be economically productive, even if it is not the place where they used to show up and work. So it may not be everybody being non-complacent, but to say that people are complacent is too sweeping. So people do help themselves, and and all this forced reassignment. We all go through different assignments, sometimes even different companies like myself. All this makes people tougher, I believe. Yeah. More resilient. Sorry, I can only offer a general.
No, but I think it is true. But I think there are also many jobs which are available, but no people wants to have them, but will still have an unemployment, right? I think, but that is not the unique situation to Singapore. I think that is actually something all countries struggle with. But maybe it was not part of the past in Singapore. So maybe it's a little bit a new trend in Singapore, perhaps.
Yeah.
Another question from Patrick Tan here, going back to the supply chains, and with the relationships between USA and China not improving and the disruptions to the supply chains due to COVID, how will this affect future of global trade and Singapore's role as a major trading hub? And if I may pitch in something which I'm sure you're asked many times also, and maybe it's a stupid question, but it's an interesting one, is with the opening up of the passages north of Russia for a bigger part of the year, how is that affecting Singapore's role as a major trading hub? So basically, Singapore's role as a major trading hub.
Okay, so I'll answer first the first question, which is US-China. I think even before COVID, there was already anticipation that as part of China's own actions to balance international and domestic trading, or movement of goods, production, consumption, that you would start to see certain aspects of what we call, in one single word, regionalization. Is China the best place to serve some other demand centers? And we see other production centers called regional centers, production as well as distribution, that were already happening. And then as production centers, we saw the drift of manufacturing towards some other countries in ASEAN. So that was already happening. What COVID added on to that was, is it happening in a resolute manner? Do you make that happen faster, or is it China plus one? Because while people were saying, yes, regionalization, it was not happening really that quickly. People were watching, oh yes, will this trade tariff be persistent, or will something change? And then do we make a bet on 20 years on one presidency, kind of thing. And I think what COVID added, the second R, which is resilience. And for that, then businesses need more data on where are the resilient routes. Yes, there are some big picture changes that may happen in the 20, 30-year future, like the northern route and so on. But today, as it stands, where are the resilient routes and where are the resilient access to markets? E-commerce will challenge trade in a sense that it wants to do things faster, B2C and then B2B, and do fast and cheap, but then C will need to be a factor. How does that get factored in, right? Singapore will continue to have to innovate to be part of these two R's, regionalization and resilience, because we are part of ASEAN, and we actually sit on the crossroads of also long routes, Europe, Transpac, and the South Asian routes as well. So we continue to innovate, but we want to be beyond volume-centric, quality-centric as well. Are we truly helping people to solve their resilience and their sustainability issues? I wish I could baseline everybody's carbon footprint for your sake, and then tell you that actually there are better ways to do it. Yeah. So if we continue to do that, we're not just a trading hub, but a solution center. And a lot of that needs digital enablement, which we are trying to get convergence around digital governance. But otherwise, it's all theory and good talk, but cannot deliver. Northern Passage is one where, in the initial instance, I think it will serve more point-to-point trade. Because if you think about container trading, right? Container on ships works like a bus service, not express bus, but multi-stop bus. So it's not a container from Shanghai to Rotterdam or to Antwerp, but the 20,000 actually churns as it goes down the multiple ports. Otherwise, why call it the L ports? So the routes actually link up economic centers. Where are the economic centers in the northern route? Only point to point, right? Now, there's also a lot of movement in sea that are point to point. And by that, I mean raw materials and commodities. So I think raw materials and commodities have a chance because you don't need to make multi-stops to make the whole economic proposition work. Express service is interesting, and you reduce the carbon footprint as well. Ironically, right? The northern route is open because of the lack of concern about carbon footprint. And now we use it to save on carbon footprint. What to do? But I think the commodity trading, the manufactured goods, 70% of what's in a container is semi-finished. So you need to connect between factories, not just economies. But there's not much in the northern route.
Right.
So I'm not being complacent, but I'd say that the demand level will rise, and in 10, 20, 30 years time, when it gets there, I think the Straits of Malacca, Singapore and all that may also be quite full. But we then want to actually move to more solution-based.
Right.
Yeah.
And the point-to-point trading is not impacting Singapore that much, I guess.
Not that much. I mean, there are many things, there are many ships that come down the Straits of Malacca that don't call Singapore, frankly.
Right.
Yeah. Like an LNG shipment from Oman to, say, Northeast Asia.
Right.
Yeah.
PSA also has many other ports, of course, in the world. We have not spoken about that. It's a global company, one of the few we actually have in Singapore. So
and we also have many dry ports now.
Yes, that's true.
Dry ports. Yeah. Half of our activities are in dry ports.
Yeah, that's it.
In terms of entity numbers. Yeah.
I wish we had more time because there's so many questions, both in the chat and that I have on my list. But before I just round it off, Tan, may I just ask, what's your advice to us as business people in Singapore? Do you have any advice as business leaders in Singapore, what we would, in your areas, how we can help you, or what we should focus on based on these things? So,
because we're speaking to quite a diverse group here, covering many sectors of industry. The one single thing I would say is that what COVID has taught me personally, and I hope we can adopt it more corporately, is a positive mindset towards a future where we can contribute towards building a stronger and inclusive business world first, because you have to be comfortable that we do have a livelihood existence, otherwise we can't offer jobs. But at the same time, spend more time thinking of preparing our workforce. I think the government side is also shifting in terms of, I'm not going back 30, 40, 50 years, right? But you can see that there's a lot more engagement, a lot more discussion. But where are the quality challenges coming from? Should come from corporates. Where are the creative ideas coming from? Should come from corporates. Let's not feel reserved if there are ideas. Let's have a positive mindset. This is a very exciting time, even though it's still very trying to do it differently.
That's a very, very good advice. So I will take that to the heart. So unfortunately we're out of time. So I think it's time for me to round off. And I really would like to thank you for this dialogue. It's a pleasure to host someone who's so open and clear and speaks with so much knowledge and flair. I really appreciate that. So,
no, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, anytime. And to everyone who's listening, I just make a marketing pitch. There are many more dialogues and events coming up. So I urge you to visit the website, and so you don't miss anything. There are several events coming, and you can see it in the event calendar. And if you have any other issues you want us to bring up or advocate for, or if you have anything you think we can help with, call us or drop us an email. The Singapore International Chamber is there to help. So I would like to thank you so much. So Mr. Tan, thank you so much for this time together. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
And hope to talk to you soon again.
Right, likewise. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.